Hi everyone, this is Heather Lautinen from the Flourish.Academy. You know what time it is? It is our weekly Q&A, and I have all the questions here on my laptop instead of using my old school iPad, and I think this is going to work better, but I'm a little bit nervous about it sitting on my lap. I'm wondering, do they make a bracket or something that I can attach to my tripod that I could sort of like mount it right there and then I could see everything? Wouldn't that be nice if I had something like that? No matter, we'll make it work today. The first question is from my friend Brittany, and she says, what is the number one rule? She is actually poking fun of me a little bit here because I always tell her the number one rule is, and then I tell her something, but I have a million number one rules because to me everything's important. But if I had to break it down to one number one rule, I would say that the number one rule is to leave things better than you found them, especially people. I want to make sure that when I am around people, I am encouraging, uplifting, I want to inspire them, I want to empower them, I want them to leave feeling better than when I found them. So leave everything better than you found it, especially people. That's the number one rule. Of course, there's also the number one rule of, hi Kim, hi, thanks for being here. The number one rule of understanding that everything is my fault or everything is your fault. What I mean by this is that when something goes wrong or it is not going according to plan or it is less than ideal, then you have to ask yourself, what's my role in this? Because when you do that, it gives you back power and then you can make adjustments. Otherwise, if you make excuses for why you can't do something, then it leaves you feeling like a victim, which is powerless. So at some point in your life, everybody will be victimized at some level or another, but choosing to be a victim is a completely different state. So anything that goes wrong for me, I always search and think, okay, what's my role in this? What could I have done differently in order to affect a different outcome or prevent something different? So I would say the number one rule is to understand that you are responsible for absolutely everything that happens in your life, and you need to make sure that you don't have a limiting belief mindset. If you're interested in this type of thing, I highly recommend Carol Dweck's book. It's titled, wait for it, Mindset, and it's about growth and abundance mindsets versus scarcity, and she does a great job of explaining it. Also, number one rule is understand internal versus external locus of control. If you're not sure what that means, then you can look it up. But basically, what I'm saying here is that you are in control of everything. You have control over everything and the outcome is completely up to you. So for instance, if you tend to use the excuse, I can't get business because there are so many photographers, whenever you say to me, I can't, whatever follows that, I don't care what it is, it's an excuse. You can't get clients because there's so many photographers, false. You can't get clients because you haven't figured it out yet, because it doesn't matter how many photographers there are. Or you say things like, I'm inhibited by the weather. I can't shoot because the weather is challenging or it's raining or whatever. And those words have come out of my mouth for sure. But the truth is, I could learn to work better in the rain, or I could choose to get a studio or not get a studio. That's my choice. I'm not going to be a victim to the weather. I mean, it's all we have to deal with. That's stupid to blame the weather for things. What does the weather have to do with anything? If I wanted to get better at shooting in the rain, then I would need to learn how to do that. Or I could choose to get a studio. But it's not the weather's fault. It's really my fault. It's not my fault that it's raining, but it's my fault how I react to it. Jim Rohn is one of my favorite mentors. He said, don't wish it were easier, wish you were smarter. And I love that, because what he's saying is, don't wish for fewer problems, just wish you had more solutions. Charlie says, I thought the number one rule was to never wear jeans to shoot a wedding. True, that is the number one rule. I have a ton of them. And you should ask me about my personal number one rules too, because they're hilarious. Okay. Oh, Kayla says, I think this would be helpful this time of year. What tips do you have for approaching and communicating with owners of private properties such as tree farms, pumpkin patches, etc.? Are there any special considerations like a signed release from the property owner? This is actually a very good question because we're always looking for locations, and this is really about meeting people and developing relationships. So if there is a place that you would like to shoot, I would show up at that place physically. You could get away with a phone call in these instances, but I've just found I work better with people face to face. You can communicate better. They're also more apt to be agreeable when you're in front of them than when you're on the phone. And you approach them extremely respectfully and complimentary, of course. I love your property. It's beautiful here. How would you feel if I brought a few clients in order to photograph them? Now, most normal people, reasonable people, would be like, yeah, sure, whatever, that's great, that's no problem. But every once in a while you'll get someone who will say no, and it's really for one of two reasons. One reason is there have been a ton of photographers that have been abusing the property, in which case you can't blame them, right? And the other reason is they just don't like people. They don't feel like having people on their property, and that is a-okay. I will always be respectful of that, but I would approach people face to face when makes sense, I guess, versus over a phone call, and I would ask them if they would mind if I use their property. Now, speaking to your insurance question and signed releases and all this, most people aren't going to want to get involved in that kind of thing. However, I will say this, as a property owner that has photographers come shoot on her property, I would much rather that you say to me, hey, just FYI, I carry my own liability insurance. That would make me happy, because then I would think, okay, if something happens to your client is not coming after me in terms of my homeowner's insurance or my business liability insurance, but your client is with you and your business carries the liability insurance. That's something that people could ask you. In fact, there are wedding venues that will require that you have liability insurance before they will even let you walk through the door. And you can't blame them, because if something happens, somebody trips over your equipment or you do something negligent, that venue owner does not want that liability. You cannot blame them for that. So if you say something like that, I would be more inclined to say, oh, wow, that's great. I never thought of that. My neighbor and I had this discussion. So for those of you that have been to my homestead, we have neighbors that are somewhat close by. We have 35 acres. But last year, Nicole Begley and I were doing an off-camera flash camera club, and I asked my neighbor if we could use her property, which was formerly my grandparents' property. Isn't that neat? Anyway, my grandpa had built this old sawmill, and we wanted to shoot around it. And she was a little nervous because I said there could be 20 to 30 photographers there. And she was like, oh, Heather, but like, what happens if someone gets hurt? And I said, no worries. I have liability insurance on my business that follows me where I go. So if something does happen, I am covered. And that put her at ease, and she said, by all means, have at it. So that's very good to know. Yes, Chrissy says the Priory. Yeah, they require insurance. If this concerns you and you're new and you don't have insurance, no big deal. I have a video on getting insurance. I have a local insurance agent. Her name is Jennifer. She is awesome to work with. It's not as expensive as you might think, and you definitely need it. Now, a follow-up to that question was from my friend Mana, and she says, are there any secrets to early access to tree farms? Secrets, not so much. I think it's just about building relationships and who you know, really. So hopefully that helps. Okay, then in a separate question, Mana says, how do you compete with other photographers when it comes to online booking? A lot of people ask for photographers on Facebook, and I usually post my name and then private message the customer with a greeting and my portfolio, which I think is a good move because, Mana, not everybody is doing that. This never seems to work, and there are so many similar styles of photography in the area. How would you approach this? So when somebody is posting for photographers, that tells me instantly that they don't have a recommendation or word of mouth referral from anyone, because they're posting somewhat blindly, which means typically, not always, I'm going to make a general statement here, is that they're searching based on price. And if they're searching based on price, then they're just going to kind of scroll through, and whatever looks decent isn't the cheapest, they're going to go for it. So that's really not my preferred method for getting clients, obviously, that way. I don't think you should not do it. I mean, by all means, continue to post and share your information and reach out to people. And maybe once in a while you'll get a hit, but more often than not, you won't. So your question originally was, how do I compete in that particular market space? I wouldn't. I'd step out of that lane and I'd find a different way to compete, because I don't want to compete based on price. Hopefully that helps. April asks, How do you handle nighttime pictures when a flash is not allowed or even indoor with low lighting? Great question, April, because I shoot in caves that are Pittsburgh churches and they predominantly do not allow flash and they are very dimly lit. So I would say that's a very similar scenario to what you're describing. So my approach to that is typically a high ISO with a fixed aperture lens wide open at 2.8 and the slowest possible shutter speed that I can handhold and not worry about motion blur or shake. So in some of the darker churches, for instance, those settings might be ISO 3200 at 2.8 and anywhere between 1/60th and 1/80th of a second. Now, please be careful. I am definitely pushing the limits of myself and my gear at this point, meaning a shutter speed at 1/60th on a 70-200, zoomed at 200 at 2.8, ISO 3200, maybe even 4000. Eek. All right, that is not going to be the greatest quality picture. I'm going to do the best that I can. However, if that's the environment that I have to work in, well, then that's what I'm going to do. So my approach, if we're not talking about flash or off-camera lighting, is typically a high ISO with a lens that has the capability of a pretty large aperture. For me, in the zoom ranges, we're talking 2.8. If you're talking about a prime lens, then obviously you can go to 1.4 so that you can get that nice big aperture to allow light in, and hopefully that helps. Okay, Kristen, Mana is answering a question for you about recommendations, so definitely check that out. Thank you, Kristen. Okay, Marie, my beautiful friend Marie with the amazing makeup. She says, back button focusing. Do you personally use it and why? There seems to be many, including myself, who swear by it and others who say, don't do it. What are the pros and cons do you see in back button focusing? I did a video on this previously. This was several months ago. I have tried back button focusing and it's just not for me. However, I have friends that swear by it and love it, so I think it is a-okay. It is largely a personal preference. Now, the people that use it say that they tend to get sharper images that way. So maybe you're one of those people, and if so, then by all means, that makes more sense for you. When I tried it, I just struggled. The benefit is separating out the two functions. So obviously one function is pressing the shutter in order to take a photo, and the other function is focusing. And then when you separate those out, so back button focusing is a button on the back of your camera, if you're not familiar, that you set AF on, and when you press it, it focuses your lens, and then you press the shutter to take the photo. So it separates out those two functions. There are definitely some advantages to that. I found a good article on this, so I'm going to post it after we finish. It was on the Creative Live website, just about why you might want to use it, setting it up, what that looks like, and they have here 4 reasons to back button focus, such as it allows you to easily swap between continuous and single autofocus. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Back button focus allows you to easily lock focus. Back button focus helps prevent focus errors, and it makes it easy to swap between auto and manual focus. So I agree with all of those, but I can do all of those with my shutter button as well. Now, the only thing I do like about back button focus, and I kind of wish I could get used to it, but I honestly gave it a try. I shot several sessions with it, and I just couldn't get the hang of it. It just didn't feel right to me. I think that's just a personal preference. However, I do like the idea of setting your camera to continuous servo using back button focus, and you can use it if you press it and hold it. It's in continuous servo, right? It hunts for a focus. It hunts for a focus till you take the photo. Or you can press it once, lock the focus, and then take the photo. But you can leave the focus mode in continuous servo the whole time. Now this, to me, would be really advantageous because depending on how I press that button could dictate whether I'm using it in continuous servo or single servo. I like that. But again, personal preference depends on how you like to shoot. I think everybody should give it a try though, because again, some people love it and find that their images are really sharp that way, and some people just don't get the hang of it, and that's me. Brooke says, I am a new photographer and I have been focusing on getting experience, educating myself, and setting up the basics of my business for the past year. I feel like 2018 is going to be an important year for me as far as establishing clients and a more consistent schedule. I would definitely agree with that. looking into 2018 and planning my goals. Number 1 is getting more clients. Where would you focus number 2 and number 3? So what she's saying is her biggest goal is to get clients, and then what should her second and third goals be? Well, let me say this about Brooke, just so you know. She is really very focused on her education. She watches a lot of classes online. She's taken every single one of my classes. She is just devouring education as much as she can, and I think that is a brilliant strategy. She is building her competence in order to lead to confidence, and I think that that's really important. So if you're new, follow Brooke's lead and really invest in your education. But then she's saying, okay, getting more clients. Well, the number 1 goal for Brooke is going to be marketing. Remember, marketing just equals awareness. People need to know that she exists. So that means getting your feet on the pavement and getting out and meeting people. You know, they say that your network equals your net worth. So you can't do this alone, and you certainly can't do it sitting behind your computer all the time hoping for clients to find you. You have to meet people. I would say getting clients in marketing is Brooke's number 1 goal, along with meeting people. Just getting your face in front of people and doing things, volunteering, taking your camera everywhere, talking to people, whatever that means. I think meeting people is going to be key, and making sure they understand what you do, what you're about, and what you're looking for. So goals number 2 and 3, marketing. More marketing, Brooke. It's just meeting people and getting out there. Always focus on perfecting your craft as well. Always getting better as a photographer and never settling. Making sure that you can get photos that are sharp, in focus, and well exposed obviously is the number 1 priority when starting a business in photography, but then you have to get clients. So you have to make an incredible experience. You have to meet a lot of people, and you just have to throw a lot of seeds out into the field. I'm a big believer in reaping and sowing. You will reap what you sow. And if you throw tons of seeds everywhere on the field, some of them are going to sprout. Many are not. But how do you determine that? You just throw them everywhere. I'm always planting seeds, ideas, talking to people, meeting, everywhere. And then some of them flourish and some do not. And that is a-okay. But it takes effort and work. Kind of a loosey-goosey answer, Brooke, but I think marketing is your key. Meeting people, marketing. You're really good. She's already really good with things like time management and her focus, so that's not an issue for her. Charlie asks, how did you start out marketing yourself, and what kinds of things did you do to separate yourself from your competition? That's a good question. What makes you special? Why should clients choose you as their photographer? Wow. I mean, Charlie got right to the heart of it there, didn't she? Because aren't we all wondering this? How can you separate yourself from the competition? Okay, when I started about 15 years ago, thankfully, there was not social media, but we did have websites, and it was just the beginning of blogging. So I started a blog in order to differentiate myself from other photographers. Then I was blogging when no one else was. So I was keeping my website content really fresh and up to date, and people were seeing that and visiting it. Okay. I have said this before, but when I started, I went from 3 weddings one year to 30 weddings the next year. And I promise you, it was not because I was talented, because the photos were not that great. I was only a year in, barely. How could they be good? They weren't. They were not good. It was not the photos. I learned very early on that people aren't buying you for the images. They are buying you because they want to be with you, and they want you to take their photos. So this about differentiating, this is all about your personality, because anyone, a lot of people could make their photos better. We could all get really good at photography and produce good, clean, sharp images and deliver. But this is about making yourself so well known and using your personality to create an incredible experience for clients. And I believe where I excelled was my personality and the experience that I provided to clients. So when they walked away from their wedding, it was way more than just the photos. I have several clients that I have photographed all of the siblings' weddings and the cousins and the friend, and they keep referring and recommending me. And these referrals go back 15 years, again to the time when my photos were not that good. I think my photos are good now. Certainly there are photographers that are way better than me. There's no question. But when people hire me, It's not for the photos. It's because they want to be around you. So this requires you being vulnerable and putting your personality out there. Very early on, I said to Craig, when they were booking me like crazy, I thought, what in the world is happening? I don't even understand why they're hiring me. I'm not that good. And he said, they want you. It's not the photos. They want you. I started to dig into this a little bit further and understand it, and ultimately found this book, How the World Sees You. Sally Hogshead. She's fascinating. She has a ton of videos on the interwebs. You should definitely check it out. How the World Sees You. And it's about your fascination advantage. So what is the advantage that you have over everyone else? Well, it's something in your personality. And she has these 49, let me take this cover off, 49 personality archetypes. You see all those? You have a primary advantage and a secondary advantage, and then that leads to your archetype. So for me, when there's a quiz, you take it, you read the book, right? It's great. I highly recommend it. Understanding what makes you special or magnetic. My primary advantage was trust, and my secondary advantage was passion, and that led to the authentic. And the authentic is someone that's approachable, dependable, and trustworthy. The flip side of that is trust and passion over here, which is the beloved, nurturing, loyal, and sincere. And I loved that. When I read this and dug into these archetypes, I thought, oh, yes, that's me. That's who I want to be. Absolutely. I've always taken great pride in being dependable and trustworthy and reliable. It's like something I can control, so I can do that. I can show up when I say I'm going to show up. I can keep my word. I can communicate. I can be accessible, which is approachable. That's what I want to be. Okay, understanding your personality archetypes is really about understanding your advantage, and your advantage will separate you out from other people. Now, that being said, I would focus really, a lot of my focus would be on getting better as a photographer. If you read any of the Chronicles of Disney, of Walt Disney, which is fascinating, by the way, as an aside, I'm not a Disney person. I think it's fine, whatever, paying $1 million to wait in line in Florida hot sun, not my thing, but Disney knows what they're doing. And anytime they struggled, it always went back to build a better product. So you absolutely have to focus on taking good photos, and they have to be so good, and you have to be so good that you give people a reason to pay attention. In other words, they can't ignore you. And in order to do that, you have to share amazing images, you have to put your personality out there, and you have to give people something to latch onto about you. We've talked about this in the past, if you're super private and reserved, this might be a struggle for you. You don't have to share anything you don't want to share, but if you give people something to talk about, I ran into someone in Walmart the other day, and the first thing she said to me is, how are your chickens? Because I'm always talking about my chickens. You give she likes chickens as well, you give people something to connect with, and it makes you magnetic. You study it. I would study it. I would read books on it. I would devour anything I could on understanding what makes me different or special, and then how can I capitalize on that? Because it's the only thing that's going to set you apart beyond the photos. Anybody can take a good photo. I hope that helps Charlie. Jessica says, how do you grow interest in a particular niche photography that is not quite as popular here as other parts of the country? So Jessica is a birth photographer, for anyone wondering. Part 2, how can you find your perfect partner photographer in your specialty? For me personally, I feel that in order to have longevity in my niche of birth photography, I must find more ways to be consistent with bookings, and particularly interested in finding that special partner since the work is very demanding with high burnout when solo. Yeah, birth photography is tricky because you're on call. So you definitely need to network with, I would say, 2 to 3 other photographers that are in the same field so that you can share your schedules, and if something comes up, obviously someone can jump in and take the session. How do you grow interest? You make people interested. You explain it to them, you educate them, and you hustle. So I know you have clients already. I would leverage that. I would use that as much as I could. I would talk to them about referring me, because if those people are having babies, chances are their friends are also having babies. And I want to get to those friends. So I know that you do an extraordinary job, Jess. I know you do very well. I would make sure that I'm providing such an incredible experience that they're just telling everyone. They're telling all of their friends, hey, I had this birth photographer, and it's maybe not what you're thinking. So here's what you need to do in any type of photography. You need to understand the objections that people might have to your photography or your price point. And then you need to come up with a solution even before they understand the objection. So in birth photography, some people might be like, oh, I don't know, I don't want a photographer in there when that's happening. Maybe they just don't understand what that looks like. So you need to show them. And they need to talk to someone that had a session with you so that they understand that you're very unobtrusive and you're just documenting, and it's beautiful and perfect. They just have some hang-ups that you have to address, and you have to address it before they even think them. How could you do that? Well, obviously you could educate and post about it. You could maybe do an interview with a past client, maybe have them write a testimonial for you, some way to just educate and share what it is you do. And you can create interest for that. I'm sure that you can. It's just gonna take work, especially if people aren't familiar with it or if they have particular hang-ups about having someone in the birth room. My friend Elise asks, what was the biggest mistake you made when you were starting out? What was the best decision you made when starting out that still benefits your business? Wow, that's a good question. So I read this yesterday and I started thinking about it. Biggest mistake. Well, my mindset is that there's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. There are only lessons. If I make a mistake, which to me is just a minor misstep, then all a mistake does is turn me in the right direction and lead me to a better outcome. So I don't view things as failures. I view them as lessons. It's just feedback. Hey, you're going in the wrong direction. You might want to do this. So I really don't feel like I ever had a huge mistake. Certainly I took missteps, of course, but I've always practiced in my life what I call regret minimization framework. So I think through things. And I think, will I regret doing this or not doing this? What is the decision that needs to be made? Is it an irreversible decision? By the way, 99% of the decisions you make are reversible, which means if you make a decision and it's the wrong one, you can change. Therefore, I'm extremely decisive. I make decisions very, very quickly. Have I made some wrong ones? Absolutely. Some missteps that I think, oh, that maybe wasn't the best idea. I'm even struggling to come up with an example, to tell you the truth. When I started out, there was no Pixie set or Zenfolio or anything like that. In order to have a shopping cart with an online gallery, you had to pay, and you had to pay big. I paid $5,000 to a developer for a shopping cart. He was well known in our industry. He was doing shopping carts for photographers all over the country. This was a thing. People were doing it. $5,000. So if you guys want to cry me a tear about Pixie Set being free or Zenfolio with their low-cost pricing structure, I have very little empathy in that regard, because we paid a lot of money and we had to keep it up to date because the technology was changing. Was that a mistake? I don't know. I mean, I needed a shopping cart. It was a lot of money. I am always profit forward in my business, and I don't take anything out on credit or debt, so I had the cash to do that, or I would not have done it. But could my money have been spent more wisely? Oh, for sure. I would say probably the biggest steps I made were always decisions about purchases. I love gear and I love gadgets, so I would buy a lot of things that I didn't really need. I don't consider that a mistake or a failure, just like, oh, maybe that wasn't the smartest thing, but I learn and move forward. The second part of your question was, what's the best decision you made that I still benefit from? The best decision I made was to really, truly care about people and to network and work with people and take a genuine interest in them and do anything I can to leave people better than I found them. And I am absolutely still reaping the benefits of that. Every single interaction that I have, I think to myself, this person knows more than I do, and they know something that I need to learn, and I just need to ask the right questions in order to figure out where their area of expertise lies or what I can learn from them. Every single interaction. I don't play favorites. So if you see someone what I'm thinking of in particular is that if you're a big conference with photographers and you're naturally inclined to want to hang around the big famous ones and ooh, what are they doing? What are they saying? But you can learn from everybody. Every single interaction is an opportunity to make someone feel better about themselves, to leave them better than you found them, and to learn something. Now, this came to light to me recently, maybe a couple months ago. I was shooting a wedding at the Priory, and I feel like I may have told you this story. Forgive me if I have. I know I told a couple people, but I went up to the bar to get a drink of water, and my friend Rob was the bartender. Now, it's been a lot of years since I have seen Rob, and I said, hey, Rob, I know you've been here a long time. My name's Heather, and we actually met, several years ago. And he rolled his eyes and he said, Heather, are you serious? Of course I remember who you are. And I said, I would never have expected that. I wouldn't expect you to remember who I am. And he said, I will never forget the things that you did and said for us. Never. And whenever anyone talks about a Pittsburgh wedding photographer or is looking for someone, I tell them that they need to hire you no matter what the cost and that you're the best. The last time I had a major interaction with Rob was at least 10 years ago. I don't even know what he's talking about. I don't know what it was I said or did that left such an incredible impression on him. But when he said that, I was like, wow, are you serious? And he was so complimentary, and I thought I probably was just kind to him. I probably just talked to him or asked him questions or took a specific interest in something he was doing. Now see, I don't know that many people would think I should make friends with the bartender at this wedding. I don't think that's at the forefront of your mind, but in my mind, every person I meet is an opportunity to learn something and leave them better than I found them. I never know how that's going to pan out. I don't ever know if I ever got a recommendation for him or if that's going to matter in the long term. I don't know that. You can't know that. You have to do it on faith. And faith means trusting in things you don't see. So this past weekend with the DJ, we had an incredible time, and I know I left an impression on him, and I don't think he will soon forget me. At least I hope he won't. Don't be forgettable. That's the worst thing you could be, is forgettable. And I decided I just wanted to make an impact on people and learn from them. And that's been a good decision because it has paid off in spades. I hope that helps, Elise. I will see you this afternoon for our photo shoot. I'm excited for that. Nicole says, what is your process when working with clients ahead of a family session? Do you ask them questions that they can answer during the session to loosen them up? Looking to get more lifestyle-based images with true interaction. I think some clients are just better at this than others. Okay, I actually have a lot to say about this. I mean, it seems like I have a lot to say today anyway. I don't mean to, but one thing you said, that very last statement, I think some clients are just better at this than others. And that's true. There are definitely people with different personalities. But I can remember one time I was sitting in a workshop with Jerry Gohinas, who is like my wedding idol, and he said, if you ever walk away from a wedding thinking to yourself, oh man, the light was awful, the couple was just boring, they're both accountants, I wish they would have worked it more, not thrilled with the images. He said, if you do that and you're placing that on your clients, I'm going to paraphrase here because I don't remember his exact words, but basically you're an idiot. Because don't wish that they had more personality. Wish you were better at pulling it out of them. So I love this challenge because I take great pride in working with anyone and everyone. Now, if you're an introvert, you might struggle with this. And Nicole, I don't know which way you land on the spectrum. Everybody's a little bit of both to some degree. But there are definitely books that can help you with this. There's a book I posted a while back. It's called How to Talk to Anyone, 92 Questions. I don't know. There's actually an app for this. Leanne was telling me about it at one point. Like questions, open-ended questions you can ask. Like things like, Hey, what's a vacation you took recently that you loved? Where do you go? Or do you have any big plans coming up that you're excited about, instead of where are you from? What do you do? You might say, any big projects at work? Anything exciting you're working on? What's happening in your life? I mean, there are ways to get people loosened up. I actually study this a lot. I study psychology and personality traits because I take great pride in being able to coax some interest and fun out of my clients because they're nervous, and I want them to be relaxed, but more importantly, I want them to be themselves, and I want them to be natural. So when you had said, what is my process working with clients ahead of a family session? Well, I have a family session this afternoon. It's a styled Christmas shoot. The client is bringing the styling because that's not really my thing, but I'm going to photograph it. It's part of a workshop. I have 4 other photographers joining me. So we're going to talk about family interaction. Obviously, you need to be friendly and talk to them. I don't think being super quiet is great because that just makes people more nervous, but I also believe that you can get too chatty. So you have to be able to balance conversation and interaction versus, knowing when to shut up. This is really important on a wedding day. I know when I need to intervene and make something happen, but I also know when I need to just back up and be quiet because there's a moment unfolding in front of me. This is a huge, important skill to have that can separate you from other photographers, because if you create an amazing experience, they'll tell their friends it was easy, it was fun, and we love the photos. And if you can remove the stress of family photos, they'll tell their friends. So I would work on this. Nicole, I think this was a great question. Do you work with them ahead of time? Well, sure, you want to get an idea for their style or what they're looking for, but this is all on you. What's my role in this? Going back to what we talked about in the beginning, I think, how could I make this better or easier? My client this afternoon is a friend of mine. She's a mentoring client. She is from Poland. She speaks English and Polish. She moved here as an adult, I believe. I don't think as a child. Her husband is an attorney. So if you're not aware of that, I could see where, an attorney could be somewhat like an accountant, maybe a little bit dry or maybe a little bit reserved. And then somebody from a different culture might have a different way of looking at things. But you know this, and the best thing you can do is get curious and ask them questions and get interested in them. People love to talk about themselves. So just ask questions, open-ended, and shut your freaking mouth about yourself because nobody cares. Again, every opportunity is for me to learn something from someone else. Obviously, I talk a lot on these videos because I'm teaching, but I really do know when to shut up when I'm at a session, ask a question, and just let somebody be heard. People just want to know that you're listening. So that's good. Mary says, I'm using a full frame tomorrow, renting the D750 for the first time. How will I get any sleep for the next week? That's my friend Mary. She's funny. She actually photographs bunny rabbits. Oh, not just your average everyday bunny rabbit. No, these are very fancy rabbits and breeds that I know nothing about, but I was talking to her recently about this, and she says, how will she sleep? Yeah, it's very exciting. And listen, if you're used to a crop sensor camera, especially an older model, and you jump to a D750, get ready to empty your wallet, because when you rent it, you're gonna love it, and then you're gonna think, I need to buy this, and I need to figure out a way to book some sessions, to earn some money so that somebody else pays for this new D750 that I want to get. Mary, I think you should go for it. I'm going to assume that you're renting that from our friends at YM Camera because they're awesome, and then you could just pick up the body from them. And that D750, I love it. I love it. I still love my D700s. I shot with my D700 the other day, but that D750 to me is amazing. Okay, the last question comes from my friend Sonia. She says, chocolate or vanilla? I guess it depends on what I'm eating. I like both. And locations, how to find locations. So this is a question. There's a group, Western Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh area locations. Are you familiar with this? It's a group on Facebook. It's a private group. I'm sure anybody can join. It's where people share location ideas, and someone will say, hey, have you seen a field with this type of plant or tree, or what about this property? And that's a really good way to connect with other people. You could drive around and scout locations. I think there's something to be said for that. Driving around and finding areas and just in your everyday travels, just paying attention to the area around you and thinking, oh man, that would look nice. Taking into consideration that when you're driving around somewhere between 10 and noon, it's going to look different than it will at the golden hour. So understanding that. But there's also an app. It's called Scout, but it's with 2 T's. So if you go to scout.com, I'll post a link below. Leanne was telling me about this earlier this year when she went to WPPI. So it's a community-driven location scouting platform. It says, Scout is a worldwide platform designed to help you find, save, share, and organize the perfect locations for any assignment. Upload images found in your recent scouting mission to create a private map of locations you found. Check it out, cities, etc., etc. So you can sign up as a photographer, a studio, or a guest. So they have it on their website, and they also have an app for it. Now, when Leanne first came back from WPPI, this is at least 9 or 10 months ago, I checked this out immediately because I thought that's great. Everybody can upload their photos and their locations and little pins on a map, and you can find it based on keywords or tags. But at the time they released it, obviously because it's community driven, there weren't a lot of people on it yet. So I would be interested to log in again. I believe I still have the app on my phone and see if people have started adding to it. But I highly encourage you to do it if it works. I mean, I'll take a look. If we all did it, then obviously there would be locations everywhere. Now, I know that there are some of you who find these amazing locations and you keep them secret. You don't want to share them because you don't want photographers using them. I'm going to recommend that if you have ever thought that you pick up the Mindset book from Carol Dweck, because that's called a scarcity mindset. And that just says that you are afraid that if somebody else uses that location, their photos will either look better than yours or they'll steal all your clients. And either way, that's just crazy talk. So share your locations. I rent the property here because you know what's funny about that? I rent the property and I have so many different photographers that use it and all of their photos look completely different. And in fact, in some of them, you wouldn't even recognize it as the same place. And they have different clients. There's enough land out there for everyone. You can share your locations. One time Susie and I got into this is years ago, and we laugh about it because we're very good friends, but she had this secret location and I'm like, really? A secret location? Nobody else can use it because why is that? I mean, if you explore your motivations behind that reasoning, I guarantee you it's ridiculous. Hey, thanks. I hope that you found this useful. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next video.